The next thing you need to know about is the way in which your adults are likely to learn. How many of you have been to training sessions where, as we've already seen from some of you, the trainer stands there, he's got a monologue or she's got a monologue voice, doesn't have a lot of interest in there, doesn't ask you any questions and just talks and talks, perhaps uses a PowerPoint projector, puts the PowerPoint up on there, talks about it, reads off the PowerPoint. Anybody been on training sessions like that?
Yeah, yes, we do.
Lots of you. Training should be fun. And PowerPoints are great, but only why? How's the best way to use it?
Only as a reference.
Only as a reference. So if you've got lots of stuff you read off, what was the best thing to do? Give them a handout. Say, read up on this in the break. Then report back to me. So you need to know how adults learn. And adults learn differently from kids. Do they? Is that true?
Certainly do.
Yeah. So how do adults learn?
More visual, more
interactive.
Much more interactive, much more visual. Yes. Who else?
and more literacy.
More literacy.
Recognition of prior learning too.
They like to have their experiences made use of, don't they? Adults, you like to know, you like to be able to put stuff in that you've got experience of. How else?
Right on level with the adult teaching them. So the kids are still on the floor learn, adults at level with the trainer.
Yeah, that's right. Kids say that they don't know what to expect and they just go in there, they soak up what the teacher says because they think the teacher knows everything. So, what else? Adults, different from kids.
Thought provocation.
Yeah, explain me some more.
We have to challenge people to think a problem through to arrive at a conclusion. Or
Yes,
an answer.
which is true. Anything else?
Maybe concept.
Concept of?
Different type of concept to children. Outcomes of the course. No preconceived conception.
No preconceived ideas. This is exactly. This comes on to a really valuable point. Preconceived ideas. That's where we have ideas about our students without really finding out about them, making assumptions. And you know what this word assume? Who doesn't know this word assume? A-S-S-U-M-E. Assume. Just because I've got an English accent doesn't mean to say that I don't wash, right?
You don't just assume it.
Yes. So if you assume something, you make an ass out of you and me. It's an indication, just an example of how you can make assumptions about your students without actually knowing a lot about them. You can make assumptions about people without knowing a lot about them. So we're going to look at adult learning principles, and this is the adult learning principles can be enshrined in RAMP2FAME. R-A-M-P-2-F-A-M-P. Some of this is a little bit difficult, I've got to tell you, but as we go through it, it'll make it a little bit easier. You need to learn this off by heart. R stands for recency, which is a little bit hard work, but when it comes to the word recent, the latest thing, the last thing you hear. So recency says is, if you use recency in your training, the last thing that your students hear, they'll remember. What will they remember?
The last thing.
The last thing. So how can you use recency in your training? You can summarize. Anyone not sure what summarize means? It means go back over it. So, recency says summarize often. So don't go on for an hour without going back over what you've talked about. Break it down into chunks. How long should your chunks be?
Not too long, probably half hour per chunk.
Half hour? At least, no more than 20 minutes is what the recommended is. And if your students have short attention spans, what should you do?
Reduce it.
Reduce that time. And so you have chunks of information which you would then summarize at the end of each chunk. Yeah? The next one is your training. Make it appropriate. In other words, get it right. Think you'd agree with the next one, M, really important. This one's so important, it's probably the basis of all our training, which is motivation. Now your students, they must want to learn, but just wanting to learn isn't enough. They've got to have a reason for learning. They must want to learn, and they've got to have a reason for learning. If they've got a reason for learning, and they also want to learn, they're going to be more motivated. For those harder ones, it's a Latin word. It's primacy. Comes from the word primary or primate. Another word for primacy or primary starts with F, ends in T. The first things. Your adults will learn much better when they're bright and awake. Your adults, you need to motivate your students from the very first minute. So, for primacy, have a motivating introduction. At this point, I will just tell you about one of my students in Jabiru who had a really motivating introduction. He listened to this, he said, yes, I'm going to have a motivating introduction. I'm going to get everybody concentrating on what I have to talk about. Of course, it was a Thursday afternoon, and we were thinking about the weekend, and it was hot, and the air conditioning wasn't playing up. So he said, I'm going to teach my students, and he came into a room just like this, yeah, much like this really, and he was going to teach us about gun licensing in Jabiru. He was a park ranger. And he came and said, today, and he was introducing it to the whole class, not just one, he had 8 people in there. Today, I'm going to introduce you to gun licensing in Jabiru National Park. This is a gun. And he pulled the trigger, and he had a blank cartridge in it. And it went, bang! And it really caught our attention. The trouble was, he spoke for the next 25 minutes. And all we could see was his lips move. We were completely there. So, a motivating introduction. We'll talk about motivating introduction a little bit later on. We'll see what you can put into it. The next one is two-way communication. Or as they say in Nuka, talk. So, they have a phrase in higher education is that you are so knowledgeable and you have so many qualifications that you go out and you talk to your students and they listen to you. And when you walk away, having not asked them a single question, not having said anything, they have sucked in all your knowledge. The sage on the stage. We don't do that. We want to talk. So no more than 20 minutes without some sort of questions and answers. And summarize often. A stands for active learning. Your students are going to learn much better if they're involved. Get them involved. Make your students practice. Some people in this training course, I've been teaching training and assessing now for about 12 years. Some people, they put their final presentation on, they come out to the front there, they're all prepared, they talk, they do their stuff, they've got their PowerPoint presentation, they put stuff together, they demonstrate stuff, and then they ask a couple of questions, and then they say, well, now you've learned how to do blah, blah, blah. They haven't taught them anything at all, they've just presented information. So don't get confused between presenting information, which is what I'm doing at the moment, just giving information out, and training, which means whatever you give out, whatever you show people, they have to show you back. They have to give that information back to you. We'll be getting on to the training part of this very shortly. The next one is multi-sense learning. So in the training situation, try to employ as many of the senses as you can. What are the senses?
Yeah, sight,
Sight.
hearing,
Smell.
Smell.
Taste.
Touch.
Taste. Touch. Hearing. Hey. Incorporate more of these things into your training, your students will understand things a lot better. There's also something else in there that you actually missed one out. You've only got 5. What about the last one? Sometimes called a sixth sense or intuition. You've got to have that. As a trainer, you have to know whether your students are actually understanding it. Before they walk away, you have to know if they understand. You can ask them questions, but in your own head, you've got to be able to look at them, use body language. You can see if they understand. Frowns, cloudy eyes, shoulders up there. We'll come back to multi-sense learning. And the last one is?
Evaluation.
Good try. Good answer.
exercise.
But it is in fact exercise. The more your students can practice what it is you're teaching them, the better they're going to be at it. That's common sense, isn't it? If we practice anything, we get good at it. If you want to learn to play the guitar, you've got to practice and practice and practice and practice. True fact, if I do not get you to practice what we're doing today, now, which I have come 1,000 kilometres to have the pleasure of your company today, but I had to leave home yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock to drive to Darwin, stay overnight at the hotel, get up early this morning, go out here. If I don't get you to practice what we're doing now, by the time tea time comes around, you will have forgotten a quarter of what we've done today. By this time tomorrow, you'll have forgotten a third, and in 6 weeks' time, when I come back again, you'll have forgotten 90%. So if I don't get you to practice this, I'm wasting your time. And more importantly, I'm wasting my time, which could be equally spent in Catherine having a good time. Yes, you can have a good time in Catherine. So exercise is really, 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 really important. Mark, you're going to put a training session together, which you have to, for this course, in fact, you've got to put a couple of them, which choose me one of those adult learning principles and tell me how would you use it in your training session.
Active learning, make them participate and actually end the task of what it is that you're trying to get at.
Nat, choose one of those adult learning principles, tell me how you use it in your training.
Probably two-way communication in my training. What I'm doing is introduction to tourist.
Yeah.
So I would get the students to talk back to me and practice introducing themselves about the area and so forth.
Okay, very good. Now, cool. Adult learning principles. Your subject, what have you chosen?
Music.
Music. But you've chosen something a bit more specific.
Right. Recording, yeah.
Recording?
Yeah.
So, name me one adult learning principle from here. How would you use it?
Well, motivation, I suppose.
Motivation? This one here?
Yeah.
How would you get your students really interested in this subject?
To show them a recording that I did.
Yeah.
And actually get them to look at how I've done it step by step. Yeah.
And they'd be motivated, wouldn't they? Because they want to
Yeah,
create
want to
their
learn
own.
it. Yeah, create
Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent answer. Lisa, choose me one of these adult learning principles you're using making a sandwich. What would you use and why?
I would use multi-sense learning.
Yeah.
I would blindfold people and get everyone first to make a sandwich or at some stage, blindfold them, swap the sandwiches around, tell me what's in it. I'd get them to hear lettuce to see if it's fresh. So I would, and taste of course, so I would concentrate more on multi-sense learning.
What a novel answer. That was quite amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that would be an interesting training session to be in. Okay.
This is going to be very similar to Lisa's because I had Meals on Wheels and I thought the multiple sense learning by giving somebody with no teeth something like a T-bone steak makes it quite difficult to eat. So smelling the food to make sure it's not off, touching it to make sure it's not too hot, those sorts of things.
Okay. So the T-bone steak.
Active learning. Well, I did mine on supervising skating, because as a youth service we do a lot of activities.
Yeah.
So they have to be active learning, to make the students practice where I'm on the job and they're with me. And then, so it has to be active learning.
Active learning, yes. It really has to be, doesn't it?
It has to be when you're supervising young people.
Yes, yeah.
'Cause you can't do it in a classroom, you have
No,
to be
absolutely
hands-on.
Excellent answer. Now,
The tool I would use would be recency. I would construct my presentation so that after each tool we went through, we would summarise it, and I'd break it down to sections of about 20 minutes. After the first tool, we'd summarise the first one. After the next block, we would summarise the two. After the next block, we would summarise the three, and so on. So it continued until the end, and then we'd summarise the whole lot. So I would just continually reinforce the summary and the recency of what we've all just been talking about.
top answer, Ray. That's straight out of the textbook. That's what I'm going to be teaching in the next section there. Exactly out of the textbook. Well done. Did you hear that?
Yeah, mine was on retail presentation, as in fishing gear. I'd probably use the bottom 7, as in do a motivational exercise with the group, with a bunch of gear. Go for it, present it really quick, have feedback between those people, between yourself, get them to use their multi-sense learning, as in sight, touch, hearing, whether they want to use a video, they want to use promotional gear, posters and so forth. Yeah, I'd run the bottom 7.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, that's the experience they're showing through.
I'd probably use the multi-sense learning and the two-way communication.
Okay.
Of course, the Bobcat would have to look at the person who we are training, talk, which is communicating by talking, and seeing, sight, touching, smell, hearing, things like that. So
especially on the pre-start, isn't it? On
yes. So, I'd probably use two-way communication.
Excellent answer. Steve?
I do the practice side of it, take them to the machine, identify all the parts that we've gone through in the exercise previous.
I think I'd use the feedback, ask question and answer and activities. That way I'd know how my guys are going every 20 minutes or something like that. Just walk around the group and have a bit of a talk to them and just find out where they are with the whole activity that we're doing. And that'd also come out to sixth sense as well in the end, where I could, if I'm asking them questions, I'll be able to tell that sixth sense to see if they are learning.
I'm going to be doing a training session on lino printing, so it's probably the best and easiest ways to actually get in there and do active learning, designing the artwork for the tile, physically cutting the tile and then